Welcome to Sunbeam's Collapsible Gate Installation Guide. In this program, we will show you how to install your collapsible gate quickly and efficiently in 5 straightforward stages. Step 1. Establish a subsurface foundation for the gate. Step 2. Set up the support beams used to hold up the rails. Step 3. Pour cement and let it dry. Step 4. Lower the collapsible gate onto the rails and connect the wiring. Step 5. Compliance testing. Let's first get the preparation work out of the way. For the installation, you will need at least 2 people to install the gate. These are the tools that are used in most cases. You may need to add or remove from the list depending on your circumstances. Also, a location for the electrical power source must be established. The power source must be located at the back of the gate, where the gate is in the retracted position. Optional IR devices are placed within the entryway and must also have access to the power source. Please note that the electrical harness cable that extends from the base or back of the gate will only extend 2 meters, and you will need to place the power source so that it is within reach. There are 2 basic types of collapsible gate placement. One is called partial open, or between the wall installation. The other is called full open, or behind the wall installation. In this example, we will demonstrate behind the wall installation. Also, there are 4 types of wheel configurations that can be installed, and you need to know which type you are installing. One type uses an outer wind resist hook wheel. Another, an inner wind resist hook wheel. Another type is the H-type rail wheel. And finally, one with an angular wheel type. In this video, we will demonstrate using the outer wind resist hook wheel. The appendices will explain the other wheel installations towards the end of this program. 2 other pieces of important information must be obtained from your Sunbeam supplier before installation. First is the rail-to-rail width, and the other, the type of rail, both of which represent important dimensions to help fix the rails into position. The subsurface foundation is the underlying concrete support below the gate and rails. This may be an excavated hole in the ground or an elevated pool, either one to be filled with concrete. Before we excavate the subsurface foundation, we need to determine the depth of the foundation at either 300 mm for standard vehicle traffic or 500 mm for heavy vehicle traffic. The width of the foundation should be the width of the rail-to-rail dimension plus 100 mm to 150 mm on both sides. The length of the foundation should cover the length of the rail. And finally, you must leave a 100 to 150 mm buffer between the foundation surface plane and the underlying rebar structure that will reinforce the concrete. First, the flat surface floor that will materialize after pouring the concrete must be absolutely established around the foundation. This can be done by using a laser level to determine the horizontal perimeter of the foundation and using a high-level stick or marking the sides of the wall. This will establish the high water mark for the concrete pour and will help us later when we install the gate rails. At this point, you must make sure that there is a drainage pipe at the far end, opposite the side of the power box. This drain should be able to drain off water that accumulates between the rails. After the ground excavation is completed, we will install the rail support frame and then fix and weld the rails to the frame. We need to emphasize that after we pour the cement, the rails need to protrude from the surface by 12 mm. This means that you need to make the support beams high enough to lift the rails to the desired height. The most commonly used 6 kg rail is 50.8 mm in height, but there are also other rail sizes and you will have to adjust the support beam height accordingly. Please note that the rail should not be in any way welded to the foundation reinforcement rebars, because the rail level could be affected as workers are walking on the reinforcement rebars before pouring concrete. To install the support frame, drill holes 1 meter apart along the path of the 2 rails. The width of the rails is determined by the rail-to-rail width we mentioned in the preparation section. Then insert the vertical rebars into the holes for both rails. These holes do not have to align precisely with the actual rail placement, as they are support rebars only. Next, you must weld the horizontal support rebars onto the vertical rebars. As we mentioned, it is very important to place all of the horizontal bars at the right height so that the rails will protrude 12 millimeters from the surface of the concrete. You need to use levels to make sure that these heights match the flat foundation surface we established earlier. You'll need to trim the excess rebar, leaving you with a flat top support frame. We will then weld the rails onto the support rebars. When you are installing the gate behind the wall, there should be a 30 to 60 millimeter buffer space between the inside wall and the rail. Also, do not place the head of the rail flush against the wall. You must leave adequate room for the drainage gutters from the rails to the drainage pipe. First, use string attaching it from one end to the other to lay out the exact placement of the rail, measuring off 30 to 60 millimeters from the wall. The rail will come in sections. Lay the first row of rails from end to end along the string. Now lay the second row of rails, measuring off the rail-to-rail distance from the first row. Note that the rail-to-rail distance is the measure from the center points of both rails. So if you measure rail-to-rail width from the side of the first rail, it should place you at the right distance from the first row. This must be carefully measured in that there can only be a 1 millimeter margin of error. Weld the first row of rails onto the support rebars following the string. Next, weld the second row of track, always making sure that you have the correct rail-to-rail distance from the first row. We recommend that you weld extra horizontal rebars in between support bars, especially near the intersection of two consecutive rails, to provide additional support after the concrete dries around them. We now need to install the stop lock, which is a security feature used to prevent forced entry. At the end where the gate will be fully expanded, install this stop lock 140 millimeters from within the edge of the inner entryway wall and 70 millimeters from the inner side of the rail. You need to weld two horizontal rebars underneath the rails to allow the stop lock to lay flat on two rebars. Weld the stop lock onto the two supporting rebars. The stop lock placement depends on the rail type and gate position, between wall or behind the wall. In our example, we use 6 kilogram rail behind the wall installation. For specifications regarding your setup, you can access the link below. In this example, we are installing outer wind resist hook wheels, which hook over the sides of the rails to keep the gate on the rails during high winds. This requires a gutter space along the outer side of the rails. We will weld an L-shaped gutter plate to the rail to form this gutter. Do the same for the second rail. Next, we will place a tape covering the top of the gutter plate to the rail, and also the ends of the rail gutter plate. This will form a gutter or cavity after the cement is poured and dried. Before pouring the foundation cement, we need to remind you to establish the water drainage pipe for the gate. The gutters we created in Step 2 must form a continuous gutter to the drainage pipe as shown. Also, IR devices require installation on both sides of the gate. One type of IR device requires power on both sides. You may want to reserve an underground pipe to carry electrical wiring across the gate before pouring cement. When you pour the cement, you must adhere strictly to the flat surface foundation we established earlier. After pouring the cement, the rail still must protrude from the surface by 12 millimeters. You must allow the cement to dry for 7 days before continuing. After the cement has dried, you can remove the tape, which will reveal a gutter alongside the rails for the wind resist hook wheels. Thoroughly clean the leftover debris from the gutter. By this time, the Sunbeam collapsible gate should be on site. Use a lift or crane to lift the gate into position. With this type of gate, there are cylinder wheels directly underneath the main tubes. Simply align the ends of the main tubes onto the rails and gently lower the gate. Next, we need to apply the wind resist hook wheels by attaching them onto the main tubes one by one, using 3 screws. Next, place the red gear cover using 3 screws. There's a 4th corner screw, but it cannot be used because of placement conflict with one of the outer wind resist hook wheels. After finishing with one side, proceed with the other side. Next, we need to establish the position of the gate behind the entryway, which means determining the base position of the gate, full open and full close position of the head of the gate, which will be demarcated by limit switches which tell the gate where to stop. First, move the gate to the end where the stop lock will halt the gate. With the head of the gate secured, next pull the other base of the end of the gate to its most expanded position and mark this position A. Then, with the base of the gate secured, move the head of the gate until it is flush with the inner entryway wall position. Move the base of the gate to its most retracted position and mark that base position B. Then move the entire gate 2/3 of the distance between B and A. Mark this position C. Secure the base of the gate and move the head of the gate 1/2 way between the current position and the edge of the inner entryway. From this position, extend down to the bottom of the gate and place the limit bump where it lines up with the limit switch. Mark this position. Move the gate out of the way and secure the limit bump to the ground at the marked position. Next, move the base of the gate back to position C and secure the base of the gate to the ground using U-straps. Next, move the head of the gate until it is stopped by the stop lock. Now move the second limit bump into position so that the arm of the limit switch is pushed back. Mark this spot. Move the head of the gate out of the way and secure the limit bump at the marked spot. Now we will connect the electrical wiring from the gate to the power supply, which has already been prepared. Extending from the rear of the gate will be a black harness cable containing several individual wires. The lines are marked 1 through 8. Use lines 5 and 6 to connect to a 220-volt circuit breaker. If you are installing wall mount control buttons, you can use lines 1, 2, 3, and 4 representing open, close, short circuit, and stop respectively. If you will control the gate with remote control and not use a control button box, you should tape the ends of lines 1, 2, 3, and 4 with electrical tape. Infrared sensors are an optional accessory. A receiver and transmitter are placed on both sides of the entryway and can sense when an object or person trips the light. When this happens, the receiver will tell the gate to immediately stop. The transmitter and receiver will require power and needs to be wired to a 100 to 250 volt power supply. Please see instructions that come with the IR device to identify those wires that receive power. Aside from power wires, there are 2 signal wires from the IR receiver. If you have a control button box, you can intercept the stop wire, or line 4, splicing the IR signal wires onto the line 4 wire. If you have no control box, you can simply apply the 2 IR signal wires to line 4 and line 3. Next, we must test all aspects to make sure everything is operating correctly. Test the open, close, and stop using the remote control. Test the IR functionality. Also test the touch stop functionality. Finally, test the neutral clutch release. We should remind you to keep the gutter and surrounding area around the rails free from rocks and other debris, which may inhibit the movement of the collapsible gate. In the original example, we used an outside wind resist hook wheel. We also have an inner wind resist hook wheel, which we installed differently. For this hook wheel, the gutter must be on the insides of the rails, which means before you pour the concrete, you must weld the L-shaped gutter plates on the insides of the rails on both sides. Place the tape and pour the concrete as before. After the cement dries, there will be gutters on the insides of both rails. Lower the gate onto the rails as before, aligning the black wheels on the main tube with the rails. When you receive your gate, the wind resist hook wheels will not be attached. You need to attach them one by one. First, remove the black plastic wheel from the main tube. Then insert the inner wind resist hook wheel and then reattach the black plastic wheel. Continue to do the same for all of the wheels. The third type of wheel is called the angle wheel. which is installed with an angle rail. When you make the support rebars, you must lift the angle rail 18 millimeters above the surface of the concrete. There is no gutter required for this type of wheel. A second type of IR sensor has a transmitter on one end and a simple reflector on the other end. The reflector will not need a power supply. The transmitter wiring will be similar to the wiring explained for the previous IR device. In our previous example, we installed a behind-wall entry gate. There is also a between-wall entry gate. Most of the installation procedures are the same, including foundation dimensions, support beams, rail placement, concrete, etc. The base position will be flush against the inner wall entryway. When placing the rails, you must leave at least a 100 millimeter buffer at the head of the rails for enough room for gutter water drainage. Finally, since the stop block will be installed inside the entryway, it poses a hazard for people walking over it. You can shear off the top of the stop block to alleviate this situation without compromising the stop block's functionality. This concludes the Sunbeam Collapsible Gate Installation Guide. If you have any questions, please contact Sunbeam from our website.